Now we will move on to a panel with the companies and business organizations. And we will talk about what are the opportunities and challenges for business regarding climate transformation in the new geopolitical context. And I'm really glad to introduce the panel. And we can see Ylva Wessén, CEO at Folksam. Hi, Ylva. And then we have also Anders Egelrud, who's the CEO of Stockholm Exergi. Hi, Anders. And then we also have Anders Gaudestad, Executive Vice President, Energy Management and Trading, Agder Energy in Norway. Hi, Anders.
Hi.
And then we have Anna-Karin Hatt, who's the CEO and President for the Federation of Swedish Farmers, LRF, from Sweden. Hi, Anna-Karin.
Good morning.
And we are waiting for Jan Moström, CEO, LKAB, and also for Åsa Pettersson, who comes... Oh, hi, Åsa.
Hello. Good morning.
I didn't see you, so I'm glad to see you, Åsa. You're the CEO for Swedenergy, Energiföretagen i Sverige.
Yes. Well, good morning.
Good morning, Åsa. And then we are just waiting for Jan Moström, CEO at LKAB. Oh, here we got Jan Moström, CEO, LKAB. Good morning. Jan? Can you hear me? I think you froze. No, you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. I have some problem with my connection here. So hopefully I will be here now for a moment. Yeah.
Perfect. And we will have a discussion here, and we have food and agriculture on the theme. We have energy, and we also have the perspective from the finance sector. And I asked you all to start out with the question, what are the opportunities and challenges in your sector for business regarding climate transformation in the new geopolitical context? And I want to start with Anders Egelrud from Stockholm Exergi.
Hi, Nina, and thanks for that, and thanks for interesting seminar so far. I start shortly. Stockholm Exergi, a locally based energy company. We're supplying more than 800,000 Stockholmers with district heating, district cooling, and electricity capacity also, and waste handling. And I think all this makes up very, very interesting in the geopolitical context we are now. We are already based on 99% of renewable or recovered energy. And our next phase actually is to establish then a carbon sink without using more resources, without using more or less anything else, instead producing more energy from a process of actually also capturing carbon, and in amount which are as high as all the traffic emits in Stockholm during 1 year from one chimney, and biogenic carbon. The new geopolitical situation, it's emphasized the need of really get rid of dependency of fossil energy. I think it has mentioned already during this seminar, fossil energy is definitely something which creates enormous stress and conflicts in the world, has done historically and will make it also going forward if we not can find solutions based on renewables, based on sustainable value chains. If I then look on the opportunities from a Nordic perspective, I can see that we have tremendous opportunities in the Nordic countries. We have already an energy sector which actually are twofold. We have the district heating infrastructure, we have the electricity infrastructure. We can develop both, but they need to be developed in combination. We need to have a holistic view on the energy sector. Taking one example, the district heating sector today provides the electricity sector with 10 gigawatt electricity capacity during winter season. That's actually 1/3 of the total amount of capacity in Sweden today. We don't talk about that. We need to remain that. It's as much as 10 nuclear reactors annually. We also need to make sure that we have local supply of electricity capacity, security of supply. We can make that by having our district heating system, combined heat and power locally in the municipalities where we need electricity capacity. And we can also, with that capacity, also handle the volatility on the energy market much better than without it. Carbon sinks will be necessary. And if I look at an opportunity for the Nordic countries, only in Sweden, we can create 30 million tons of carbon sinks without utilizing more resources. And that would be a green industry. It would make it possible to store it permanently in technical carbon sinks or storage. And it will be possible also in the future to utilize it for producing synthetic fuel with hydrogen and producing other products. Then we really create a value chain which are actually a green transition. But the challenges are many.
Just short, Anders.
Katarina in the beginning mentioned some, and I think that the framework for doing this is not established. The Repower Europe is actually threatening the Nordic countries regarding biomass, and it's threatening it because taking waste into consideration. We are throwing 100 terawatt hours on landfill in Europe instead of utilizing the energy and importing Russian gas and oil instead. So there are many challenges, and I will come back to them later. But
thank you so much, Anders, and we will come back to these challenges again. And I would like to hear Anders Gaudestad from Agder Energy in Norway, who's the Executive Vice President of Energy Management and Trading. You're also in the energy sector. So what is your perspective of opportunities and challenges?
I think it's both a challenge and an opportunity. And to be a part of that in these times is really exciting as well as of course difficult. But Agder Energy has a clear job to provide clean energy for a sustainable society now and in the future. And that is really meaningful, especially in this geopolitical context we are in right now. And we are a vertically integrated renewable group, meaning that we have all parts of the value chain, from production, distribution, energy management, and sales of renewable energy to the end customers. And I think that is a very good position to have right now, because the demand for that will just increase immensely in the future. And it leaves us with great opportunity to actually increase the business at the same time as we contribute to achieving key priorities for society. And given the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine, this has been more evident than ever that renewable energy is a good solution for the short and especially the long term. And I think also, Agder Energy being located where we are in the southern part of Norway with direct access to Central Western Europe countries gives a lot of opportunities across those borders. And we also produce now hydropower in the southern part of Norway in a price area with being the influence of the European power prices right now, we have record high financial results and an opportunity to significantly increase our future investments into more renewable energy solutions. Also in new areas like offshore wind, battery, hydrogen, and more. So I think there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges. And to simplify, the challenges, I normally talk about the energy trilemma, which is not in balance right now. You have the affordability of energy, you have the sustainable energy, and you have security of supply. And what we have seen lately is, of course, a dramatic shift towards security of supply, and maybe even security of the nations. That results in high unbalancing in this trilemma, extreme prices, high volatility, market uncertainty, and a risk of political interference in the market. And there is no easy solution to the challenge in the short term. In the long term, it's easier. And to see that shift in decision making, the speed that is needed, I think it's a huge challenge, but also a lot of opportunities.
Thank you so much, Anders. So let's move on to Åsa Pettersson, who's the CEO for Swedenergy, Energiföretagen, that collects all the energy companies here in Sweden. Your perspective of opportunities and challenges.
Thank you very much, Nina. And my colleague from the energy sector have already pointed to many of those opportunities and challenges. But let me just underline that energy is, of course, at the forefront of the climate transformation from the very start. The climate challenge is caused by the burning of fossil fuels and will not be solved until we reduce the burning of these fuels. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine adds a completely new context to this, which of course is both a challenge and an opportunity at the same time. As Anders was into here, security of supply and diversity of energy supplies are now strong reasons to reduce the dependence of Russian fossil fuels. Also, like we heard from DG Energy and Katarina in the start of today's meeting. But as we know, the war in Ukraine has driven up prices on the energy market sharply and also added a lot of turmoil and volatility. So it's in this context that we now have to really use this as an opportunity to speed up this transition, because higher prices might at the same time be a driving force to diversify and invest in fossil-free energy and accelerate the build-out of renewable energy, as we've heard. And we all know electrification is a large part of the answer also to the transition of the industry and the transport sector. And here my member companies and the energy sector is at the center of making this possible. But then we need a lot of focus of this and speed and a lot of support from policy, which I guess we will come back to in a while.
Yes, thank you so much, Åsa. So let's move out from the energy sector to the food and agriculture sector. And let's start with Anna-Karin Hatt, CEO of LRF in Sweden, Federation of Swedish Farmers. And looking at your sector, we could hear earlier from the researchers talking about there will be a huge, even worse crisis. We are facing a food crisis in the world. And right now we know how important Ukraine are for the food, and we know how important Russia are for fertilizers. So in your perspective, what are the opportunities and challenges for the agriculture, Anna-Karin?
Well, I'm representing the Federation of Swedish Farmers, LRF, and we represent approximately 136,000 individual members. They run some 70,000 companies, mostly within agriculture or forestry. And they are really highly committed to making food systems more sustainable while providing healthy food for our own needs in Sweden, but also elsewhere. I would say that there are great possibilities and great challenges at the same time also for food production. Begin with, farmers and forest owners are, to begin with, at their core, working in a way where they are a solution on many issues related to climate change. We all know that growing crops on the fields is not only a way of producing food, it is a way of binding carbon into the ground. Breeding cows or pigs is not only a way of producing meat in a very sustainable way in our country, it's also a way of producing valuable manure, creating biodiversity in our country in fields that cannot be used for anything else than breeding cattle. The big challenge to biodiversity in Sweden is not that we have too much livestock in our country. It is that it has been decreasing over many years. So we have to make that shift. And looking into forestry, I mean taking care of the forests and using it in a wise way to provide society with renewable energy, renewable building materials, even clothing made out of materials from wood is of course a very good way of replacing harmful fossil fuels and binding carbon at the same time as the forests are growing. So to begin with, I think that farmers and forest owners really have a lot of good news to tell, but we still have more to do and challenges to face. When it comes to contribution, I think that we are doing a lot, but we can do more when it comes to using the possibilities of storing carbon in agricultural fields. We can do more in producing bioenergy to replace fossil fuels in the farmers' own production, in our own country, in our own region, but also for markets abroad. This new geopolitical context has really underlined that we are very vulnerable when it comes to food production in Sweden and in the Nordics. And that's due to our heavy dependency on import of almost everything that we need to produce food on a farm level. That's fertilizers, it's fuels, it's seed, it's fodder, and many more. And lots of it by direct imports from Russia and other things produced with fossil fuels from Russia, even though it might be produced in Europe. So as a country, and now I'm talking for Sweden, we really need to increase our own production of food, and we need to increase our own production of the imports, the inputs that we need to produce food. Today, we are only producing around 50% of what we are consuming when it comes to food in our own country today. That's way too little, and we have great possibilities for many reasons to produce more food in our own country for our own needs, but also for other needs. So I would say that all this was very obvious for us long before Russia began the horrible crimes and war in Ukraine, but it has become even more apparent through that and after that. And now we really need to make this happen. Start producing inputs, increase production both of agriculture and of renewables from both agriculture and from the woods in Sweden.
Thank you so much, Anna-Karin, Hatt. And we started out with energy here and moved over to agriculture, but it's still energy. And we will move over to LKAB and to Jan Moström, who's the CEO for LKAB. And there is a connection between agriculture and also LKAB with the fertilizers and the need for that. So please, Jan, what's your perspective on possibilities and challenges?
Thank you. We'll also, of course, connect to energy.
Of course.
I would say LKAB, we are a company that was founded back in 1890, and we have mainly been an iron ore producer. But also we have a large footprint as industrial minerals supplier. And we are also now working with develop a mineral called apatite in our operations to a product. But if we go to the opportunities for LKAB or the mining industry in the context of regarding climate change and the new geopolitical content, I would say it's mining or metal and minerals that will be one of the most important solutions to offset the energy problem. If we are going to replace oil, gas, and coal, because that is, as we heard previous, the core of the climate transformation, we need to replace that with wind, with solar or nuclear power, in some content of hydropower. But all those production systems will need a lot of minerals and metals. And those mineral metals will generally be producing electricity. And with electricity, we will also produce hydrogen. The other parts which we use a lot of especially coal, but also natural gases, is to reduce oxides. In our parts, we are reducing iron ore with coal in blast furnaces. And that produces a lot of volumes of carbon dioxide. That is, our intention is to replace that with, sorry, I got something in my throat, is to replace that coal with hydrogen. And by doing that, we will remove for just our small part of ore production, 30 million tons, roughly 40 to 50 million tons annually of carbon dioxide. But also if we go into other materials, for example, apatite or ammoniac, that is one important part in fertilizers, mineral fertilizers. we are today using natural gases to reduce ammoniac, and by replacing that with hydrogen, we will have a huge impact on the climate change, but we will also start to produce green mineral fertilizers. So if we see the mining industry and the mining industry's impact, both in climate change and also in the new geopolitical content, we will have core positions. First, to ensure that we will have the materials, metals and minerals that will ensure that we will be able to produce the energy that is necessary, both for electricity, but also to produce hydrogen, and use hydrogen as a reagent for oxides to create the materials that will be so important. And of course, the challenge will be how to ensure that the materials that we will use going forward are green materials. That means that the materials has to be, we must have some sort of traceability on these materials. How do we compare the steel production of green steel with steel produced with blast furnaces? How can we ensure that the mineral fertilizers we are using are green mineral fertilizers and not by using natural gases, etc.? So I would say the metal and mineral industry will be the core to offset both the climate change, but also to ensure the value chain, how to ensure that the material, the raw material we are using are, so to say, fair trade material, and especially in the context with Russian-Ukrainian crisis, with Russian as a main suppliers of raw materials.
So thank you so much, Jan Moström, CEO LKAB. And all this need finance, and that brings us over to Ylva Wessén, CEO at Folksam. And you have a quite different role in this panel, financing and also working with insurance also. So what is your perspective from your role of opportunities and challenges, Ylva?
Well, thank you, Nina. Thank you so much for arranging this interesting seminar, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate from a different perspective. And as you mentioned, I'm here today representing Folksam, which is one of the largest insurance and pensions companies in Sweden. And we insure almost every other Swede, and we are also one of Sweden's largest investor. The topic of today is climate and security and how to navigate in a new geopolitical context. And the war is, of course, a primary challenge not only for Ukraine, but for the whole Europe and the world. But crisis causes problems, but they can also offer an adjustment window. We have touched base on that previously today. And many of us has realized that Europe's dependence on Russian oil and gas is unsustainable in many perspectives. And we therefore need to rethink about our energy supply in a Nordic perspective. Despite the concerns in the outside world, we need to stay focused on the climate work, and the climate issue remains acute. And we as a societal level cannot afford to lose momentum. And as an investor, we are continuing to work according to our plan to have net zero emissions in our investments portfolio to 2050, but also in our own operations, in our insurance operations to 2030. And there will be, I think, opportunities here for us, both as an insurance company, as an investor, to be part of a faster transition to a fossil-free world. And there will be investment opportunities where I hope Folksam can play an important role, because we have this net zero target to 2050. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ylva. And all the panelists, you could say, that we had during the whole day have been talking about what we need from policy, and also mentioned it clearly as well. There is there's so much we need to get from the policy to get this to work. And I would like to ask you, if you start with the energy sector, what we need right now to speed up the climate transformation, as you all mentioned that you contribute to. So what is the most urgent, what we need from both EU and on a national level? And I will start with Åsa. Now we can hear you.
Thank you very much, Nina. Yes, now you can hear me. Thank you very much, Nina. Yeah, there is for sure a lot to do, and I mentioned the need of speed. So on the large scale, we need huge investments in both new energy production and new power grids. I mean, only in Sweden, we're facing a doubling of electricity demand until 2045, which means we need to build out one more electricity system or energy system like the one we have today. Of course, here, both electricity and heat, like Anders Egelrud was mentioning earlier, are very important, because this needs to be seen from a holistic perspective and keep an integrated approach. And what we urgently need from policymakers is long-term conditions that promote these investments and a reduction of lead times and the bureaucracy to build it. This is, of course, more long-term, and we're facing a crisis here and now on both how to phase out fossil fuels and the higher prices. As we heard from the Commission this morning, I mean, this cannot be fixed during this year or next year, but we need to start doing things already now. And in the short term, we need clarity on the role of biofuels, where my members feel a lot of insecurity right now. What is the future of use of biofuels? I mean, within the Fit for 55 packages, we get very mixed signals. I was very happy to hear from DG Energy this morning. She stressed several times the role of bioenergy in both electricity and energy sector and in general in Europe. So that felt very good, but that's not what we see in the legislation right now. So this we need to keep an eye on together. And we also need competitive conditions for the heat and power sector. Anders mentioned the potential of the heat that we have already in the system, but we also actually have 500 to 1,000 megawatts unutilized capacity of combined heat and power. Electricity that is, which could be added to the electricity production of Sweden if, for example, the tax on bio oil was taken away immediately. And from a political perspective, that is not a large risk. It's not. It's just complicated from a bureaucratic perspective. But this is just something that the politicians could do that would ease up and improve the situation already for the coming winter in Sweden. And also the possibility to counter trade this capacity between the Swedish price areas could be used much more systematically, and there could be incentives in place from the Swedish transmission system operator to stimulate this. So that is on the short term what we need. And also what we don't need are short-sighted interventions in the market. We need to, even if we are in a hurry, we need to look at this from a long-term perspective and in close dialogue with all stakeholders, industry, energy sector and policy, speed this up together. Thank you. I'll stop there. I'm sure there's more to say.
There's so much to say, and I just want to follow up with a question, because we heard Thomas Kåberger, professor at Chalmers, saying that the fossil prices we now see, it's like having a global tax on carbon that we really longed for a long time. At the same time, you say we see the high prices. So what should it be, high prices or not?
Yeah, but I think this is right now we have the high prices, but that's also why this could be described as this tax. Actually, fossil fuels are more expensive than renewables or other types of fossil-free energy. So, I mean, it's because of the fossil fuels that we see the higher prices. So, in this period of transition, we need to cope with the high prices, but at the same time, then accelerate the measures to move away from the fossil fuels. And that's why it works works, like Professor Kåberg was saying. We have this tax right now that really gives us the incentives to move away from the fossil fuels.
Thank you so much, Åsa. That's a good explanation that we really needed to hear right now. And also I want to move over to Anders. When Åsa mentioned DG Energy and the role of bioenergy, Anders also was nodding his head. So what is your perspective? What do we need from policy right now to speed up the transformation, Anders Egelund at Stockholm Exergi?
I very much what Åsa is saying is actually crucial and important. But if you look at even more realistic, and what we need now is actually to secure the whole discussion around biofuel. That's important for the Nordic countries, not only for the energy sector. It's extremely important for forestry. It's extremely important for the agriculture sector. That we need to make sure. We need to understand that there are different possibilities in the Nordic countries than there are in southern Spain, for instance. We also need to take into account we can't utilize waste in the way we're doing in Europe, for instance, and that we need to have a long-term perspective on. Utilizing resources otherwise lost has been a tremendous success story in the Nordic countries, and is one reason why we are so CO2 free today. We need, of course, address the plastic in the waste, but that can be done, for instance, like we are doing with the sorting facility, which are connected to the waste incineration plant in advance. But then I also think that there are, I will emphasize more than the long-term perspective. We need also in the Nordic country understand that I think that the energy-only market might be reviewed. We need to have maybe a thoroughly done investigation to have a holistic view on the whole energy market to make sure that we can have affordable electricity, affordable capacity, and make sure that we are willing to invest in both electricity production, network, and the whole energy system as such. And I think that is an urgent need to start that process, because it will take a couple of years. Then looking at the next step, I think it's urgent also actually to make sure that we heard from Katarina this morning that they are spending a couple of very huge amount of money from the European Innovation Fund. We have received a grant for our major flagship project, BioCCS in Stockholm. But we should take a holistic view also in the Nordic countries from a political point of view, how to make sure that we utilize the extreme, unique competitiveness we have of creating carbon sink, producing hydrogen, and at the same time going into the green transition, which we need. I think also when I listen to Jan Moström, we need to make sure that there are electricity in the mining industry. We need to make sure that there are hydrogen from the processes. And then we need to have a really holistic view. And I think, unfortunately, we need to have a holistic review of the whole energy system sets up in Sweden to make sure that we are willing to invest in it in the future.
Thank you, Anders. Let's move over to Anders in Norway from Agder Energy. You're not members of EU, but you still are affected by it. So what is your perspective? What do you need from policy?
A lot has been said here from Anders Egelund and Åsa Pettersson, but I think from our point of view, we definitely like the need for speed and determination on policies in order to accelerate actually the green shift, the green transition. And in Norway, I also feel that we have a kind of a moral commitment for governments and companies alike. The reason for that is a lot of the renewable companies are municipality or stately owned. So you benefit of all of the ownership, and also on the oil and gas industry, which is also, a lot of stately owned. A combination of effort between the renewables and the oil and gas company, we definitely see now a huge investment into offshore, into hydrogen, and to have determination from the politicians in Norway to actually be a part of that green transition will gives us a lot. And just to put a couple of numbers on that, Åsa mentioned that the numbers for Sweden in the region of southern Norway, where we own the grid, we have used 100 years to build the grid that we own, that is in the length of around half of the globe. the demand for grid in our region is the same as we have used 100 years to build. We have to build in the next 4 to 5 years if we should keep up with the demand. So the politicians then to really, have high speed and determination in all the processes is definitely important to keep up the speed.
We got a question from the chat. I don't know if you've seen it, but Norway is doing fantastic things in the energy sector. But when will you let the oil stay in the soil, if you say so? When will that happen? Just a short response on that.
I did answer it, but I can comment on it. I think right now we should be actually happy, all of us, that Norway can supply so much gas to the European countries. We provide about 20% of the demand right now, but we all know that is temporary. It will go down, and we will shut it down the road. But right now, I think it is important, and that is also, seeing who the owners is behind the gas from Norway. I think again we also have a moral commitment to invest into renewables. And to put a timeline on that I think is extremely difficult. But we talk with all the big oil and gas companies in Norway, and we partner up with some of them as well in order to invest into renewables. So it's not an easy answer, but it will definitely disappear down the road.
Thank you so much, Anders. So let's move over to Anna-Karin and Hatt from LRF. So what is your perspective? I know there is a big need for a lot of policy in your sector, and both from looking at the energy perspective that already mentioned, but also from the agriculture. So what do you say?
Yes, that's true, really true, Nina, and I won't mention them all, but I would like to mention a few on food and energy. And to start with food production, we have had a quite optimistic debate and discussion so far this morning. But I would say that food production in Sweden is really under stress right now. We all know that in the long run, we have the need and the possibility to increase production in a very sustainable way in Sweden. But right now, Swedish farmers are really facing severe challenges due to this new geopolitical context. And that's due to the high prices and fast increasing prices on these inputs that I mentioned before: fertilizers, fuels, seed, fodder. Everything has increased a lot during 4 or 5 months, and we have seen a 20% cost inflation when it comes to inputs needed to produce food in Sweden. So right now, unfortunately, we really need crisis help from the government and from the parliament, and we hope that it's on its way now during June. Talking about food production, I would say that it's not policy, but it is quite important that the market does its share. And in the long run, we are of the view that it's not good for a sector to be dependent on political crisis packages when it comes to being drain or heat or cost inflation that we're facing right now. So in the long run, we have to make sure that the market has the possibility and the capacity to pay the prices that farmers needs to be paid to reflect the costs that they have for producing food in a very sustainable way, as we are doing in Sweden. Some positive steps from a farmer's point of view has been taken when it comes to prices, but not enough. Still not enough. When it comes to food and energy, I would say that what Swedish farmers and forest owners really need now is clear messages from the market and from the policymakers that it is a priority to increase sustainable farming and food production and to increase renewable energy production. It's really important that the farmers and forest owners feel that the society wants them to produce more. That's really important. And I would like to echo Åsa when it comes to the European level. We really see that EU policy has to be changed. It has to improve conditions for increased production of bioenergy, of renewables, of sustainable fuels. They are saying one thing in the speeches, but in policy legislation is still not as positive and long-lasting as it should be in order to make these huge investments happen. We have great renewable resources in the Swedish and the Nordic woods and on the fields and in waste produced from the woods and fields that we have to use in a very much better way when we are trying or have to get rid of our high dependency of fossil fuels and materials and dependency on countries that we really don't want to be dependent on in the future.
Thank you so much, Anna-Karin. Let's move over to the mining industry, if you say so, and to Jan Moström. What do you want to see from policy?
What I think is the most important thing is to develop a transformation policy coherent with climate and environmental policy. Because if we really want to offset the climate change in a new geopolitical context, it's utmost important to develop and create a regional value chain. And that means that we have to start with a substantial increase in power production, distribution, storage, and with that as a base, develop new methodologies, processes for green mining and also green metallurgical performance, where we need a lot of these electricity and hydrogen. And with that as a base, you have to take the next step. You have to transform blast furnaces into electric arc furnaces, and then you have deal with most of the climate impact from energy production and reduction of these materials. And if we are going to get a permit for each part of these quite complex processes, this will take an incredible amount of time. So how to find a way to get access to land, because all these operations will need access to land and also access to permits. And this has to be in an efficient way that we haven't seen for decades. So with a transformation policy as a foundation, start to work with how to create these regional value chains that are the foundation for what will come after.
Thank you so much. So, Ylva, your important sector that will finance all this, what do you need for policy to speed up the transformation?
Well, I will start to say that I don't agree that the high prices on oil and gas has the same effect as a carbon tax. It's not the cost that is put upon fossil fuel producers. And one of effect of the oil and gas prices going up is that it has a positive effect for owners and investors that have invested in oil and other fossil-based energy producers. So unfortunately, this might attract more investors to increase their investments in fossil-based energy.
Good point.
And that's going in the wrong direction. And as I mentioned, for example, we have a net zero emission target for our investments, and we will continue to work according to our plan to net zero targets at 2050 for our investments. But we have a strong financial position, so we can withstand considerable turbulence in the financial markets. But I would say it's worrying time right now. And here we need support from policy to stay focused on the climate goal and to provide long-term incentives and long-term conditions. And right now, oil and gas companies are making a lot of money. And I would say we need a carbon emission tax more than ever right now.
Good point. And you are so also dependent as we are running out of time. So just a short comment. So important of the value chain. You have your investors and you invest in the value chain. And if you should just say one word, Ylva Wirsén, about the value chain perspective and the transformation.
Yeah, it's important that we look at the whole value chain and have a systematic approach and a holistic approach. And our investment in the steel company, SSAB, I would say is a good example for that. When we invested in SSAB, we did that to support their important transition to fossil-free steel production that they are leading. At the same time, we are investing in one of Sweden's largest companies that have the largest emissions. It stands for 10% of all Sweden's carbon dioxide emissions. So for our own portfolio, we went at the wrong path, but we have a net zero target, and that is due to our promise to the UN-convened Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance. And we are committed to make a real world impact, to do change for real. So all investors need to support the companies that actually do that, and not only to have our own portfolios as green as possible.
Yeah. I want to thank you all. This went too fast. Ylva Wesén, Anders Egelrud, Åsa Pettersson, Jan Moström, Anders Gaudestad och Anna-Karin Hatt. Thank you so much for your contribution. It's been so valuable.